Very good morning, students. Welcome to your English literature class. Our topic for today is Daffodils. Given in your book, that is Treasure Trove, a collection of ICSE poems and short stories, volume 1. So students, by the end of this video, you will be able to understand the concepts of the poem Daffodils composed by William Wordsworth. You will be able to understand the summary and the message given by the poet. You will be able to understand how the title of the poem is relevant. So students, let's read about the author. So the poet of the poem Daffodils is William Wordsworth. He was one of the most eminent English poets and is rightly considered as the leader of a new era, a new movement in English poetry. Wordsworth had great affinities with nature and common man. He found invisible bonding between man, nature, and God. Among his best known poems are Daffodils, The Solitary Reaper, Tintern Abbey, the Lucy poems, Ode on Intimations of Immortality, and the Prelude. Now students, let's read the origin of the poem. So here the word origin means beginning. The poem Daffodils was inspired by a real incident. Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy came across a large number of golden daffodils during a walk in the woods. Here, the word came across means met by chance, and woods means forest. Wordsworth gave poetic expression to his experience, and the poem he wrote was published in 1807. Its revised version appeared in 1815. Students, here the word revised means changed. It is important to keep in mind that the lines, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, were contributed by Wordsworth's wife, Mary Hutchinson. So children, the poem Daffodils is based on a real incident. The poet William Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy saw a large number of daffodils when they were walking in woods. Whatever the poet had felt at that time was expressed by him through his poem. It was published in 1807, and in 1815 the poem was again published with some changes in it. And you can see these lines. These lines were added by William Wordsworth's wife, Mary Hutchinson. So students, let's proceed further about the poem. Daffodils is Wordsworth's most famous work and shows vividly his love of nature. It underlines the idea that beautiful objects of nature like daffodils, flowers that bloom earliest in spring in England, fill our mind with pleasure. Even the memory of such objects delights us. The poet tells us how he once saw a large number of golden-colored, beautiful daffodils growing beside a lake. In their company, he felt happy and was lost in their beauty. He continued to gaze at the beautiful sight. Afterwards, whenever he was lonely or sad, the memory of these beautiful flowers filled him with great happiness. His heart began to dance with the dancing daffodils. So students, here the word vividly is given. It means clearly. Pleasure means happiness. Delights, to give somebody great pleasure. Gaze, look steadily. So students, this poem can be considered as Wordsworth's most recognized work, which portrays his love and affinity towards nature. Through the poem Daffodils, the poet expresses the idea that the blessings of the nature in the form of beautiful things fill our minds and hearts with pleasure. The daffodils are bright yellow flowers that bloom in spring season in England. Now here students, the poet once saw an abundant number of golden beautiful daffodils beside a lake. He was completely lost in their company. He continued gazing at them for a long time. The memory was so vivid and delightful that just recalling the sight of daffodils filled the poet's heart with pleasure whenever he was in a sad mood. His heart still danced with the dancing daffodils. Now students, let's proceed further. Main points of the poem. So let's read the first point. The poet recalls one of his idle wanderings. So students, here in the first point, the meaning of idle is not doing anything. Then there is a word wanderings. Here wanderings means to walk somewhere slowly with no particular sense of direction. So here students, one day the poet was roaming alone like a lonely cloud floating over the hills and valleys. The poet is trying to convey that he was not in his best spirits and was feeling low. Now let's read the second point students. Suddenly his eyes fell upon a large belt of golden daffodils blooming along the bank of a lake. Now here students, the meaning of blooming is flowering. So here, suddenly he witnessed a field of golden daffodils grown beside a lake. Now proceed to the third point. To the poet, the daffodils looked as beautiful and numerous as the twinkling stars. So here students, the word numerous means many. So here, the poet thought that the daffodils were as numerous as the stars that shine and twinkle in the Milky Way. Then, the dance of daffodils surpassed that of the waves in the lake in the gentle breeze. The word surpassed means to go beyond in amount, extent, or degree. So here students, the poet says, when the breeze blew over them, the waves too were dancing. But the dance of daffodils surpassed their dance in liveliness. A poet could not but be happy in the company of daffodils. Here students, the poet means to say that in the company of daffodils, a nature-loving creature like a poet cannot help being happy. Then the next point, now whenever the poet is sad or lonely, the memory of the daffodils fills his mind with pleasure. And the meaning of the word pleasure is happiness. And here students, whenever the poet is tired and dejected, he closes his eyes. As soon as he closes his eyes, the picture of dancing daffodils appears from his memory and accompanies him in his solitude. The beautiful sight of daffodils fills his mind with joy. Now we will read the poem in detail. So here is the first paragraph. Daffodils is the outcome of actual visualization rather than imagery. It depicts the sight the poet actually enjoyed in the company of his sister Dorothy while they were in the woods beyond Gobaro Park. So here students, first of all, the meanings of the words. So the first word is visualization, which means the formation of mental image of something. Then the meaning of imagery is visual images collectively. And the word woods means forest. So here students, in the first paragraph, the poem is very much based on a real incident. Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy came across a large number of daffodils during a walk in woods beyond Gobaro Park. He gave it a poetic expression when he wrote the poem Daffodils. Now students, let's read the second paragraph. In the beginning, the poet describes himself as a cloud that floats over the hills, underlining the fact of his seclusion, though he was not lonely in reality. All of a sudden, his eyes fell upon a large belt of daffodils by the side of the lake. They were sheltered under growing trees. A gentle breeze made these golden-colored flowers wave and dance. So students, the meaning of the word underlining is marking. Seclusion means isolation. And the word sheltered means protected. So here, in the beginning, the poet was roaming alone as a lonely cloud that floats over hills and valleys. Suddenly, he witnessed a field of golden daffodils. The daffodils caught his attention and he was attracted to them. He was mesmerized by the beauty of daffodils as they were dancing in the breeze. Now students, let's read the last line of this paragraph. The poet uses the word host for the daffodils as if they were welcoming the poet being their guest. So here, host is used for a person who receives or entertains a guest. And here, the poet uses the word host for the daffodils as if the poet was their guest and they were welcoming him. Now let's proceed to the next paragraph. The poet feels that the daffodils were as numerous as the stars that shine and twinkle in the Milky Way. They were spread in a long line on a bank of the lake. The poet saw a large number of them moving their heads as if they were dancing and rejoicing. So here students, the meaning of the word numerous is many, and the word rejoicing means great joy. So here the poet was fascinated to see the daffodils that were innumerable like the uncountable stars shining and twinkling in the Milky Way. The flowers occupied the entire place and it looked like a never-ending line. Now students, this is an exaggeration of expression done for the better poetic effect. The poet also says that the moving daffodils appeared to be doing a happy dance. So let's proceed to the next paragraph. The poet observes that the waves on the surface of the lake seemed to be dancing. But the dance of daffodils surpassed their dance in liveliness. The poet feels that no poet can help feeling delighted in the presence of such delightful companions. So here students, the meaning of the word surpassed is exceed. Liveliness means the quality of being energetic, and the meaning of companions is friends. So here students, when the breeze blew, the waves were also dancing, but the daffodils outdid the waves in the dance. The poet mentions that in spite of being pleasing, the waves could not compete with the beauty of the daffodils. And in such a company, a nature-loving creature like a poet feels delighted. He feels that the daffodils danced like a human beings expressing joy and energy. He continued to gaze at the beautiful scene. He was so lost in its beauty that he could hardly realize its worth then. He realized its worth only when he was away from the sight. The concluding stanza of the poem is quite important. It is, in fact, often quoted by critics to prove Wordsworth's point that poetry takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. It is important to keep in mind that Daffodils, like many other poems, records a past experience. That is why the poet says, "For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude." So students, first of all, write down the meanings of the words. The word gaze means stare, worth, value, critics, experts, quoted, recited, origin, start or beginning. Tranquility means peace. So here students, in the concluding stanza, the poet describes the memory that he acquired as he walked through the valleys and hills covered with daffodils. He is not present at these valleys and hills right now. He is lying in his house on a couch. He probably had a bad day and is sad and worried. Being dejected and tired, he closes his eyes. As soon as he closes his eyes, the picture of dancing daffodils appears from his memory. It has become his pain healer and accompanies him in his solitude. Therefore, the poet mentions that it is the bliss of solitude when he remembers the beautiful scene of the golden daffodils. Now students, let's proceed to the last paragraph. The memory of the scene of golden daffodils fills the poet's mind with joy. His heart begins to dance with the daffodils. He forgets his sadness or loneliness. It is, of course, in solitude that human mind captures the things already seen. What the poet wants to emphasize is that nature is a source of eternal joy to man. So students, here the meaning of the word solitude is loneliness, captures, catch, and eternal means without end. So students, this is how the poet has explained how nature has become an aid for him in his low times. Just when he recalls the memory experienced years ago, it proves enough for the poet to rejoice in his bad mood. His heart is filled with positivity as he remembers how the daffodils danced to the tune of the wind. Now students, proceed to the next part, that is the title. Wordsworth entitled his poem Daffodils. The title Daffodils is apt as the whole poem is about the golden daffodils which the poet saw during his walk and which became a source of continuous joy for him. So students, here the word apt means appropriate, So students, Daffodils is an appropriate title for the poem, as the whole poem revolves around the daffodils. So students, this is all about our today's class. Your homework is read and revise summary of the poem. Thank you.